CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Tens of thousands of people moved from their homes in flood-hit China. The death toll rises to 33 as record rainfall continues to batter the country.
Meanwhile, Germany begins the clear-up operation in the aftermath of its devastating flooding, and there's a warning of more severe weather to come.
Ultra-low rates are to stay in the Eurozone as the ECB sticks to its pandemic recovery plan.
And after the pandemic, why the pingdemic threatens to bring UK shops and services to a standstill. The death toll in China's flooding has now reached 33 in Henan province. 8 are still missing.
Record rainfall and flooding continue to batter the country, affecting over 3 million people as authorities begin the clear-up operation. A total of 376,000 people have been moved from their homes and relocated to safer ground. Businesses, homeowners and communities are starting to count the cost of the devastation brought by days of rain.
Well, this week's floods killed 4 people in Gongyi City, some 60 miles away from Henan's capital city, Zhengzhou.
Houses were destroyed, bridges collapsed and railways blocked by landslides. Zhou Jiaxin reports.
Before police reached isolated villages in Mihe Township to save lives, the constant rain seemed impossible to navigate.
It was severe. Roads were gone, with no telecommunication signals or lights. Supplies were insufficient.
More than 23,000 people in the storm-hit Gongyi City in central China's Henan province have been relocated in the past 48 hours. The torrential rain on Tuesday flooded the town overnight and triggered landslides. Armed police rushed to reinforce dikes and repair roads.
Roads out of the town are already fixed. The National Emergency Department last night deployed drone telecommunication devices, and our mobile phones finally got signal.
Zhao, who aided the fight against COVID-19 in neighboring Hubei province last year, joins the front line.
You have no idea. All the people, even those injured, have joined together to help each other in this disaster. Being a part of it has been so worthwhile.
The rainstorm is forecast to move north, providing a chance for the post-disaster reconstructions, particularly for those hard-hit businesses.
We didn't expect such a disaster. The water inside the store was at least 1 meter high. All I can do is clean up. I haven't thought about what to do next.
Many residents like Monster have to rely on instant noodles and bottled water. Local authorities say the pressing issues also include COVID-19 prevention, helping with traffic, and the resumption of gas and electricity supply. Zhou Jiaxin, CGTN, in Gongyi of Henan province.
Well, volunteers have been supporting the disaster relief work in Henan and sharing their stories.
At the front, the water is a lot deeper than here, and the cars cannot go through. We were using lifeboats to carry people to safe places, where the water is shallower, where they can walk.
We've been working to drain the water and delivering water and food along the highways. We've also been helping to relocate the stranded. We've delivered 1,700 bottles of water, 1,150 loaves of bread and a lot of instant noodles.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel says the bill for damage from the catastrophic floods in her country will be immense. More than 170 people have died and 155 are still missing following the worst natural disaster to hit Germany in more than half a century. During her final summer address before leaving office, Merkel said patience will be needed to rebuild communities.
At the moment, we are mourning the loss of 170 people, and people are still missing. The cost of the damage still needs to be evaluated, but it is immense. The national train service alone has announced the destruction of 600 kilometres worth of train lines. We will need great patience in repairing all this damage.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Trent Murray in Frankfurt. So, Trent, this is going to cost Europe's biggest economy a lot of money.
I think that's an understatement, Robin. I don't think even the experts and politicians in Berlin have a real idea about how much this is going to cost, because the scale of the devastation is so high and so widespread. You've got a range of critical infrastructure damaged and offline. Angela Merkel mentioned just one of them there, the Deutsche Bahn train lines. They join things like autobahns, the electricity network, the fresh water network, cell phone data. I mean, the list goes on. And then you've also got the affected communities themselves, hundreds of thousands of people in areas where homes have been filled with mud and streets are littered with debris. And yet, despite the biggest disaster Germany has seen in living memory, people in those communities continue to relentlessly work to try and clear up what is there and get their communities back up on their feet.
It's been a week since deadly floods devastated northwest Germany, and the colossal cleanup goes on. And on. And on. Arriving in the village of Ahrweiler, the recovery effort is in full swing. Flood victims flanked by out-of-town volunteers, all trying to salvage what they can.
Well, I actually was in Belgium, made some vacation for 2 days, and we heard that the rain was so hard, so we decided to get back home. And when we first saw the situation around here, we thought it was very bad, and we did not expect it to be so bad.
Klaus Hauser's bakery business sat right in the path of what locals describe as an inland tsunami. And like so many here, he says all he could do was run to higher ground and watch as the water washed away his livelihood.
The loss will be in the millions. I don't even know if I'm going to try to rebuild. I have 5 shops and they're not here anymore. They don't exist anymore.
While salvage crews work to clear away the rubble, the terrifying memory of the night the rain came will likely be around for much longer.
I was at home, and then all of the blue lights started flashing. I didn't know where my father was. He spent the night on the roof of a submerged car until he was rescued in the morning. So I didn't sleep.
Well, the rains may have passed for now, but the blazing summer sun has returned. It means that this cleanup has become incredibly hot, sticky and labour-intensive. But locals here say the long hours are worth it. They want to get this community back up on their feet. And there's a real determination to just clear through the mess, roll up the sleeves and not stop until the job is done. And that same spirit of determination extends beyond the disaster zone. Down the road from Ahrweiler, we arrive in the smaller neighbouring village of Waldorf. Its higher elevation meant it was spared from the floods, but townsfolk say they now feel a duty to help those less fortunate than them, and they're doing their bit for the recovery effort with roadside rest stops.
We have created some places where people can shower, eat and sleep. People from all over Germany are driving through here. It's great. It's incredible. They are all trying their best to help.
That solidarity will be needed to help Germany get through its worst natural disaster in living memory. But so too will money, something politicians in Berlin are promising is coming quickly for flood victims who are left trying to rebuild their lives from the ruins.
So, Trent, the clean-up operation obviously underway with lots more still to do, but it looks like those hit regions are now facing the prospect of more heavy rain.
That's right, Robin. Probably the last news people in that region wanted to hear. The German Weather Service saying today that they are tracking more weather coming in from the west, more severe thunderstorms, more heavy rain. And so they are very cautiously watching that weather radar and assessing whether they need to put out any emergency evacuation orders. Of course, one of the main criticisms around last week's disaster is that not enough early warnings were given, and some people say they didn't feel like they were given the advice to evacuate in advance. So the German Weather Service will be wanting to avoid making a repeat of that mistake. They maintain that they did send warnings to local authorities, but then it was up to those same local authorities to issue evacuation orders in their area. So there's a real assessment going on right now to understand what went wrong in that chain of command and why those warnings weren't sent to some of those affected communities. During that press conference today, Angela Merkel was asked about this, and she said while she felt like the existing warning system operated the way it was meant to, she also understood the criticism, and so she said that there would be an investigation into assessing whether a cell phone broadcast warning system might be more appropriate for Germany moving forward. In other words, if there is a natural disaster coming, just flood the area's mobile phones with text messages to let people know to escape to perhaps higher ground or to safety. It's obviously too early for that with this existing weather system that seems to be coming in. So the German Weather Service will be looking at it in the more traditional way and probably keeping in very close contact with those local authorities to make sure there's no more repeats of that deadly disaster last week.
OK, Trent Murray in Frankfurt. Thanks very much indeed.
Well, as flooding devastates China and Germany and heat waves fuel fires across the United States and Russia, G20 environment ministers are in Naples to talk climate change. They're hoping to heal a rift between rich and poor countries over climate finance and want to find common ground ahead of COP26 being held in Scotland in November. Officials say little progress is being made, with a cluster of countries resisting any firm commitments.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the US and Germany agree a deal on Russia's gas pipeline, but not everyone is happy.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Just a reminder for you that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. You can also find us on YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
Germany has reached a deal with the United States over the future of its controversial Nord Stream 2 pipeline with Russia, the 1,200-kilometre line, which will pipe natural gas under the Baltic to the German coast at a cost of $11 billion, has been consistently opposed by Washington. The State Department has called the Nord Stream 2 a bad deal for Germany and for Europe, saying the project hands too much power to Moscow and risks being weaponized. Under the terms of this new agreement, any such move would risk sanctions. Well, let's talk to Dr. Thomas O'Donnell, who's a global energy analyst at the Hertie School of Governance in Berlin. Dr. O'Donnell, welcome. Well, a deal is a deal, but President Putin is presumably cracking open the Russian champagne. President Biden won't be celebrating so much.
Yes. Well, what should I say? This is not a deal that I think the Biden administration wanted to make. I might disagree. One could disagree with their assessment, but it is true they came in when the thing was 90-something% complete, and Trump had refused to really go after the pipeline. He only put sanctions when Congress forced him to. And the situation was the Germans had made it very clear to the Americans that no matter what happens, they're going to finish this pipeline. Every sanction that had been put on had been overcome by the Russians simply performing the tasks. So it probably would have been very difficult or impossible, perhaps, to stop it. And Biden made this decision. The Germans put him in a very difficult position with everything that was coming up. G7 meeting, NATO meeting, wanted to show a real change of unity of the Western alliance, transatlantic alliance, and then go confront Putin at a summit. And the Germans were playing hardball. They simply were not cooperating beforehand. They wanted this pipeline for their own, well, I would say, national interests.
One U.S. Republican congressman has described this as, in his words, one of the greatest foreign policy blunders in recent history. You're immersed in this subject, but explain to us how so.
Well, okay. Whether it was a blunder or not, we have to wait and see. What the bigger scheme is here. It's definitely does damage to the United States image with our allies in Eastern Europe. And it has been the United States that's been taking the lead in Eastern Europe through the 3 Cs initiative and developing infrastructure to tie these countries together to better resist Russian dependence on Russian energy, the Chinese Belt and Road, and so forth. So the deal that was gotten, what I have to stress about the deal that was gotten, maybe it's sort of face-saving for the United States in the sense that everything Germany has agreed to here is nothing that you wouldn't expect one of your allies to already be willing to do. To put sanctions on Russia if they have aggression against Ukraine, to put sanctions on Russian energy if they cut off energy to Europe through Ukraine. I mean, this is the or they're going to invest $1 billion or so in Ukrainian green energy. Believe me, windmills aren't going to stop Putin, and the Germans already were pushing to invest this money in Ukraine. So, there's not so much compensation here. What more the United States could have gotten out if they would have put sanctions on Germany, directly sanctioning German companies, everything would have blown up before the German election. I understand Biden's point of view. And it probably might not have stopped the pipeline. Then how would the United States have looked? Weak in another way. So you're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't at this point.
Some energy commentators are suggesting that Europe is heading for a gas war. Is that overcooking it, or is that realistic?
Well, the ball's always in Putin's court, and now more than ever. Now, it depends what Mr. Putin wants. What has happened is, as we all know, the energy prices in Europe are quite high in the wake of COVID. There's a gas shortage, and the prices are at record levels for a decade or so. Now, this is a time when normally Gazprom would be making money. The Ukrainians offered to them extra transit through their country, and extra transit to Europe in general is being offered to them. And this has been, since the beginning of the year, and they're simply not buying it. They have the gas. They don't buy it. They're not filling the storage that one would need for the coming winter. So this not only drives price up for the Russians, but it puts Europe and Ukraine in a precarious position if Putin decides, say, to do something militarily in Ukraine. He also sort of has the European Union by, well, he has them in a bad situation energetically. And so it could very well be, I would say, a gas war per se, but it's not a gas war in that way. It's him using gas as a geopolitical weapon. 40%, for the last many years, 40% of the gas that Europe uses comes from Russia. And that's something they can't escape, and so he has a leverage.
Dr. Thomas O'Donnell in Berlin, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you, sir.
With fears over the spread of the COVID Delta variant, Europe's central bank says it'll continue with its policy of ultra-low borrowing costs for the foreseeable future. The ECB says negative interest rates and its bond buying programme will stay until inflation reaches its 2% target. The central bank's president has been outlining her reasons.
The euro area economy is rebounding strongly, but the outlook continues to depend on the course of the pandemic and progress with vaccinations. The current rise in inflation is expected to be largely temporary. Underlying price pressures will likely increase gradually, although leaving inflation over the medium term still well below our target. Our policy measures, including our revised forward guidance, will help the economy shift to a solid recovery and ultimately bring our inflation to our 2% target.
Carsten Brzezinski is chief Eurozone economist at ING in Frankfurt. I asked him for his reaction to the continuation of the ECB's low rates policy.
Well, it's a lot of old wine in a slightly new bottle, meaning Lagarde, ECB President Lagarde, had promised us really a crispier communication that was not very crispy. But in terms of the substance, what the ECB delivered was becoming more dovish. So in short, it means that interest rates will remain extremely low for even longer than initially anticipated. And at the same time, any end to the asset purchases is not in sight.
So do you think it's doing enough to stimulate activity and inflation?
Well, I personally think that the ECB is doing enough, because when you look at the last 10, 12 years, the ECB never made its inflation target of back then close to but below 2%. So now this inflation target was slightly revised upwards to 2% with symmetry around it, so which means that the ECB should actually do even more to reach 2%. The only question is, can monetary policy alone really bring inflation back to 2% if there are so many factors driving inflation which are out of the remit of a central bank and the ECB in general? So I think we are having extremely loose monetary policies, and I would have rather heard the ECB talking a very gradual end to this ultra-loose monetary policies rather than actually promising that this will not end at all, and may even keeping the door open for more stimulus.
And what does this all mean for its pandemic support programme? How long do you think the economic support measures will have to continue for?
Yeah, on the pandemic emergency purchase program, Lagarde really tried not to say a lot. The only thing that she said was, we didn't discuss it. I hope they did, in all honesty. This program runs until March 2022. But with everything that the ECB announced today, it, in my view, looks as if this program will be extended beyond March 2022, which also then means that we will see only a very gradual reduction of monthly asset purchases by the ECB next year, and not as much as most analysts have been looking for.
Europe has, of course, been hoping for a strong economic recovery this summer, but how much has the rise in COVID-19 cases put paid to that?
It's too early to tell, in all honesty. The rise in the Delta variant and new cases is still very limited in most European countries. We've seen over the last 18 months that particularly the manufacturing industry has become more immune to social distancing restrictions. So what we've seen is that even if governments were to reintroduce social distancing right now, the economy will hardly suffer. If there are economies which are going to suffer, it will be the Southern European economies, because they are highly dependent on tourism. And if now the rise of infections means that countries will close their borders again, that traveling will become more complicated, and we're still looking for August, one of the main months of the summer vacation period for Southern European economies. This could be a severe hit to the southern part of Europe.
Well, the spread of the Delta COVID variant across the US doesn't pose an immediate risk to economic recovery. That's according to some Wall Street analysts. Well, joining us from New York to tell us why is our correspondent John Terrett. Hello to you, John. So tell us why. Why are the markets ignoring the Delta variant?
Hey, Robin. Hey, Jamie. Well, on Monday, they did not. You remember on Monday, there was very real concern about the rise of the Delta variant, which I know you've been dealing with in the UK for a lot longer than we have here. But it became obvious over last weekend that it was very prominent and prevalent here throughout the whole of the United States, particularly in the Midwest and in the South and also in California, though I don't think here in New York in quite the same way. And on Monday, I remember being on the program telling you, I think on Tuesday, how the market fell by more than 700 points. Now, there was some profit taking going on, a little bit of, let's take a bit of money off the table here, rejig it around, that sort of stuff. But it was mainly because of this concern about the rising Delta virus, and in particular, what it would do to the recovery here in the United States. Now, since that, in fact, let me give you some details about where we are with the Delta at this very moment. In the state of New Jersey, which is very close to where I am today, in lower Manhattan, we've gone from 4% of cases that were the Delta variant to 70%. Okay, New Jersey is the bedroom community for New York. In the normal times, people work in Manhattan. They live in New Jersey, and their hospitalizations are above 50% now for the Delta variant. And nationwide, the figure is now 83%. So 83% nationwide of the COVID cases are the Delta variant. Now, Wall Street is at this moment overlooking this completely. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, Wall Street does not think that there will be any more lockdowns, no more social distancing. Wall Street does not think the American people will be able to tolerate that. And anyway, governors and the president, they can't force people to do things in America. They can only recommend. So, and you see this in California, where the Delta variant is rampant. The recommendation is simply wear a mask. They're saying just put a mask on indoors and outdoors. Now, some breaking news for you this very minute. It is being reported here that the White House is thinking of asking people nationwide to wear a mask just because of the rise in the Delta variant. But again, it's only a recommendation. So no more lockdowns and very strong earnings. And here are some of the earnings from today. We've got American and Southwest, the two airlines, both returning to quarterly profit, although I suspect there's some help from government money there somewhere along the way, as there was with Delta last week. AT&T, the giant telephone company, which has done very well, beating Wall Street expectations, adding customers for their self-service and also adding customers to HBO and HBO Max, their streaming service. Whirlpool, for example, which is America's maker of white goods, in particular washing machines come to mind. Very, very impressive second quarter sales. And even Crocs. Now, I don't think adults should wear plastic shoes. That's a personal opinion, okay? I really, little kids, that's fine. Adults, not so much. But anyway, Crocs stock is up 10% right now because they had an absolutely blowout quarter because everyone's coming back outside now. And what do they want to wear? Plastic shoes, apparently, which actually makes me feel a bit queasy. But anyway, the stock is down a little bit now. It's up 6%. It was up 10%. But anyway, Wall Street has decided that this Delta variant is nowhere near doing to the U.S. economy what happened to it 12 months ago when coronavirus first came here to the United States. And one of the reasons for that, and it's a little bit sad in a way, is that Wall Street has decided that because this variant affects those who are unvaccinated, and we're getting horror stories of people turning up in the Midwest and doctors saying, look, we can't do anything for you. You've already got it. You can't be vaccinated now. You actually have it. And some people are very sick and some people are not, as befits the style of this particular illness. But Wall Street has decided that these people who are unvaccinated at the moment are not the ones who will be buying hotel tickets or airline tickets or HBO subs or anything like that, driving the economy forward. In other words, it's what the Americans call a bifurcated recovery. That's what they call it here. As so often happens in life, a sort of twin speed recovery with people who have money, who have jobs and never lost them, able to go ahead and drive the economy, and those who are working in restaurants and in some hotels and those jobs where they got fired almost immediately, unable to do that. And right now the Dow is down just a little bit, and that is because we've had some grim jobs data. The weekly jobs report was up, whereas it had been expected to go down. Robin and Jamie?
John, good to talk to you. And for the record, I agree with you about the Crocs. John Terrett there in New York.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, final preparations are underway for Tokyo 2020, but with just one day to go, organisers fire the head of the Olympic opening ceremony.
The EU's digital COVID certificate, which offers the promise of unlocking hassle-free travel around Europe this summer.
In less than 2 weeks' time, the Czech border will also open to all EU and Serbian citizens. 4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine.
18 and over can receive a COVID-19 vaccination, but it does come with conditions.
Third wave will probably take longer to emerge. This vaccination centre is part of a massive effort to try and drive down the numbers of the new variant that was first identified in India.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we try to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN. Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories: tens of thousands of people moved from their homes in flood-hit China. The death toll rises to 33 as record rainfall continues to batter the country.
Germany begins the clear-up operation in the aftermath of its devastating flooding, and there's a warning of more severe weather to come.
And ultra-low rates are here to stay in the Eurozone as the ECB sticks to its pandemic recovery plan. Well, let's get more now on the extreme weather hitting China and other parts of the world. Ma Jun is the director of the Institution of Public and Environmental Affairs in Beijing. I asked him what the conditions are like now in Henan province.
Fortunately, we have just gone through the worst of it, and now it's getting better. The rainfall in Henan province is now getting lighter, and after these days of torrential rainfall.
What is your sense about this? Can we say categorically that this is the story and the consequence of climate change?
Yeah, of course, each of these extreme weather have some sort of a specific reasons behind that. A kind of a low vortex in Henan, and then the kind of a typhoon coming, and actually two typhoons approaching China at that time, and then keep pushing all this humidity, this wind with all this steam from the sea into the inland. so we can't just say specifically this one is linked to climate change, but from the 1960s, we do observe a steady rise of extreme rainfall.
As we watch these other freak weather events happening worldwide, is there perhaps reason to believe that these kinds of weather conditions will intensify in the coming years, or is this just a tragic one-off?
I think according to all this scientific research, we do see a rising ratio of extreme weather and climate change-induced disasters. So that has been observed. And also, most of the scientists believe that the rising temperature will lead to a more sort of dynamic climate, so that will lead to all this extreme weather and disasters. And now it's extremely worrisome to see the bushfire in even deep north in Siberia, and those may cause, and also a kind of a drought in Amazon. Those may lead to something called the positive feedback that can release far more carbon into the air and worsen the greenhouse effect. So we must pay attention and start taking action now.
How much is China's flooding tragedy about building cities in the wrong places, in particular in areas prone to flooding?
That part we also need to pay attention. I think now, when we face this climate change situation, first we must mitigate, we must reduce our carbon emission. China pledged to go carbon neutral by 2060 to neutralize more than 10 billion tons of carbon dioxide. But on the other hand, we must try to take actions to adapt to a changing climate. So how to build our cities in the right place and in the right way to make it more resilient to all this climate change impact. That's also a major challenge.
Tokyo Olympics organisers have fired the director of the opening ceremony just one day before the event over his past comments making fun of the Holocaust.
Meanwhile, COVID-19 infections continue to rise among athletes and the staff working at the Olympics. Adam Hunt reports from Tokyo.
Kentaro Kobayashi, who originally was supposed to be directing the whole of the ceremony, has been sacked because of anti-Semitic comments he made on a Japanese comedy show back in 1998. This is hugely embarrassing for the organisers. Literally on the eve of the event, they could never have predicted this. And earlier this week, of course, organisers had to withdraw another person who was involved in the event. The composer of one part of the music that was going to be used during the opening ceremony was also dismissed after admitting abusing classmates when he was at school, using anti-Semitic comments and also mocking people with disabilities. And it's not the kind of attention that they would have wanted ahead of the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. We have had some official details about who will be in attendance, 950 people in total, which is such a tiny number when you consider that the stadium behind me hosts around 65,000 people at capacity. 15 of those people will be dignitaries, including the First Lady Jill Biden, the French President Emmanuel Macron will be in attendance as well, and unsurprisingly the Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga will make up a group of about 90 delegates. The rest of the people will of course be athletes. They've all been permitted to come if they wish. They will have to stick to very strict social distancing guidelines. They'll have to wear masks and stick within all of these very strict COVID rules that we have at the Olympics this year, and there will of course be some media in attendance as well, but a tiny fraction of the people that you would normally see at an opening ceremony for an Olympic Games.
Well, despite the obstacles, the opening ceremony of the Tokyo Olympics will take place on Friday.
Maya Yoshida takes us through the final preparations from the Japanese capital.
Big crowds in front of the National Stadium. People hoping for a sneak peek of final rehearsals inside the arena. Around them are some of 60,000 police officers mobilized for security operations. And messages from children around a training center for athletes. One reading, "Don't let coronavirus defeat you," and another reading, "Aim for gold."
It's happening, so I'm looking forward to it. I hope the Olympics will bring back some energy to Japan. A year ago I was worried, but now I just want to enjoy the games. It took a long time to get here.
A long wait indeed, after Tokyo won the bid in 2013 and the one-year delay in 2020.
Visitors are here in front of the National Stadium waiting for their chance to take a picture with the Olympic rings. So there's a sense of excitement here, but across Japan, people are growing skeptical about hosting a safe and secure Olympics with scandals and a spike in coronavirus cases heading into the opening ceremony.
Tokyo has seen a big jump in cases from previous weeks, signs that a fifth wave is looming just days before the main event. Experts also warned that daily infections in Tokyo could spike to a record high of 3,000 during the first week of the Olympics.
As a doctor, I'm against hosting the games. The no spectator decision was clearly needed.
Tokyo is under a state of emergency, and public concerns remain strong as it welcomes thousands of athletes from over 200 countries. Roughly 80 people linked with the Olympics have tested positive so far, some ending their Olympic dreams before it even started. On top of risks of getting infected, athletes are also trying to protect themselves from the scorching summer heat and intense humidity in Tokyo. Despite all challenges, Tokyo 2020 let the games begin. But remember, it's going to be a quiet one. Ma Yoshida for CGTN, Tokyo.
In the UK, the rising number of workers being told to self-isolate is threatening food and fuel supplies. The number of pings on the National Health Service app to self-isolate hit a record 600,000 in England and Wales in 1 week. Louise Jabarkle reports.
Reports of supermarket shelves running empty and fuel shortages at petrol stations. Some businesses in the UK say they don't have the staff to keep parts of the economy running. That's because hundreds of thousands of people have been pinged by an official health app after coming into contact with someone who's tested positive for the virus, meaning they need to self-isolate for up to 10 days.
What we're seeing is pockets of issues in specific places where case numbers are particularly high. And the most important thing is that the government acts now before the situation does get more serious, so that we don't see more empty shelves in more places.
In England and Wales, in the week to July 14th, a record number of people were pinged by the app, almost 620,000 of them. Among the businesses affected are major names like Lidl and the UK's second largest supermarket chain, Sainsbury's. One company, Iceland, has had to close some of its stores because of a lack of staff. Despite the growing worries, the UK's business secretary said there was no need for panic.
I am very mindful of the fact that businesses and other people are very concerned. They are worried about how they can keep their businesses afloat. They're worried about getting suppliers. I understand that. But I think we shouldn't try and create a false sense of alarm.
Making matters worse is the lack of clarity for employers. The government initially said critical workers, many of whom have worked throughout the pandemic, would not need to isolate when pinged. Days later, that plan was shelved. But now, in another apparent U-turn, officials say they will change the guidance for specific sectors.
This is the week that England lifted most of its COVID restrictions against the advice of many health experts. It was supposed to be a step towards normality, but it's already being overshadowed by the impact of a so-called pingdemic that many feel could have been avoided. Louise Jabarkle, CGTN, London.
The Czech Republic is offering financial incentives for young people to get vaccinated, but the government has also announced measures for those who refuse.
From September, all non-vaccinated citizens who want to go to restaurants or to the gym will have to pay for a test. Johannes Plešberger reports now from Prague.
The Czech Republic not only offers vaccination without the need to register, but is now also launching its own COVID prize raffle. Those who have just been vaccinated can win mobile phones, sneakers or gaming vouchers. In the last 2 weeks, the Czech vaccination program has stalled. The number of jabs administered each week has been cut in half due to a sharp drop in the number of people coming forward. But despite the low turnout, the government is making sure it's stocked up, borrowing hundreds of thousands more doses from its EU neighbors. Now the big challenge is getting people to take them.
The goal of the lottery is to motivate people to get vaccinated. You get a lottery ticket which you fill in and you put it in a box. And the agency which is running the lottery, they are choosing every day the winners of the lottery.
Given the long queues, as for example at this vaccination station in a Prague shopping mall, more walk-in facilities are now being opened across the country. According to the government, the lottery is aimed primarily at young people, many of whom are not yet vaccinated and account for the largest share of recent new infections.
I think that lottery for me is stupid. I'm not interested in winning anything, but I think that it will draw more people to vaccination maybe.
Personally, I didn't know. I came here for the vaccine, basically. But I think it's a great idea, definitely. I support that idea, absolutely.
So will you participate?
Yeah. Well, if it's free, yeah, of course, yeah.
Although infections are slightly on the rise again, especially in the Czech capital, the number of hospitalizations remains low for the time being. Like many other EU countries, the Czech Republic insists on compulsory testing or vaccination before going to restaurants. Until now, the state offered COVID tests free of charge in many places.
Another motivator for vaccination is the planned end of free corona tests from 1st of September. After that, anyone who wants to go to a restaurant or a gym in the Czech Republic will have to be vaccinated or regularly pay to be tested. Johannes Blechberger, CGTN, Prague.
China's National Health Commission has rejected a World Health Organization proposal to investigate a possible coronavirus lab leak in Wuhan.
Vice Minister Zhang Yixin also condemned a paper posted online by a US academic that accused Chinese researchers of trying to cover up evidence.
When I first saw the plan, I was stunned. It focuses on the hypothesis that China has violated lab rules, thus causing the virus leak. This shows disrespect to common sense and arrogance in the face of science. WHO experts previously visited the Wuhan Institute of Virology and concluded that a lab leak was extremely unlikely. The WHO carefully chose the experts. We should respect their conclusions. We can't accept such an origin study plan.
French President Emmanuel Macron has held an emergency cybersecurity meeting after reports he was a target for phone hacking using spyware. He's one of several world leaders believed to have been targeted with the powerful Israeli software known as Pegasus. Our correspondent Ross Cullen is in Paris. So, Ross, it sounds like President Macron is seriously concerned about these potential hacks.
Robin, so seriously concerned that he convened that national security meeting earlier today at the Elysee Palace with senior ministers to try to get to the bottom of this situation, with Emmanuel Macron's phone number appearing on that list of potential targets whose phones could be potentially infected with this spy software. We now know after the end of that meeting that Emmanuel Macron has changed his phone, he's changed his phone number, and also the government spokesman has said that the French government will be urgently reviewing its cyber security protocols. What we see in France among the media is the finger of blame being pointed at Morocco, the state security services there, wanting potentially to monitor President Macron's phone, along with several other ministers, including the Foreign Secretary, the Education Secretary, and also the Finance Minister as well. Morocco, for its part, says, well, our king was on the list of potential targets, so it's nothing to do with us, and we're ready to initiate legal proceedings against anyone who accuses us of getting involved with the malicious use of that spy software, as you say, Robin, developed by the Israeli firm NSO, which says it develops such cyber technology simply to help governments try to prevent and investigate terrorism rather than having the ulterior motive of being able to spy on journalists, dissidents and politicians. And the French president here, one of the leading figures in Europe when it comes to people appearing on that list, so serious the situation, says the Elysee, that they had to convene this urgent national security meeting to try to understand the background to all of this, and there will be ongoing investigations to try to clarify.
And Ross, we're hearing responses from other governments too.
Well, French President Macron is one of these world leaders who appeared on that list, along with Barham Salih, the Iraqi president, Cyril Ramaphosa, the South African president, the Pakistani prime minister, other prime ministers as well, former prime ministers, and one king, as I said, Mohammed VI of Morocco, appearing on this list of potential targets, people of interest for clients of NSO, potentially monitoring with this spy software. Once it infects your phone, which can be done remotely, it's able to scroll through your contacts, have a look at your photos, read your messages, read your emails, activate the microphone and turn on the camera, all remotely activating this device. So the situation is serious, and the situation is, Robin, as you say, international. We have had allegations that the Indian opposition MPs have been monitored. Also, denials from the outgoing administration in 2018 in Mexico, saying that they were not involved in monitoring the current president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. 50 people connected to him, his relatives, brothers, his aides as well, all apparently monitored by the previous administration, wanting to know what's going on, denied by the Mexican outgoing administration at the time in 2018. So there really is an international scandal now, which NSO, for its part, says it totally denies, and it says that this cybersecurity it develops is only to try to prevent terrorism, try to investigate terrorist incidents, and not monitor people like Emmanuel Macron's phone.
Ross Cullen in Paris, many thanks.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead.
This isn't actually my real voice.
Of course, this isn't my real voice either.
Hiding your voice to stop you from harassment online. How gaming developers are harnessing new technology.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Thailand's first appointment-free vaccination centre has been overwhelmed as COVID cases across the country surge. Hundreds crowded around the giant Bang Sue station in Bangkok to get jabs. Health officials have warned that Thailand could see its daily infection rate hit over 30,000 unless the vaccine rollout speeds up.
In China, the city of Nanjing has brought in travel restrictions and mass COVID testing for the whole population. That's after it reported 13 domestic transmissions. Local government aims to test all 9.3 million people. People wanting to leave the city need to show a negative test taken within 48 hours.
17 people are still missing after a cargo ship sank off Liberia's coast. This crew member was rescued after being stranded in the water for 49 hours. 18 others were also rescued. Liberian-registered Nico Ivanka left the capital Monrovia on Saturday, despite being barred from setting sail for failing to meet safety requirements.
Hungary says it'll start financing pandemic recovery projects from its own national budget as talks continue with the European Commission over access to EU funds. The Commission says Hungary must carry out judicial reform and investigate corruption before its recovery plan can be approved, unlocking billions of dollars of EU finance.
Norway is marking 10 years since the killing of 77 people by a far-right terrorist in Oslo and a nearby island. Anders Breivik, a white supremacist, detonated a car bomb in the city centre before going on to shoot dozens of youngsters attending a camp on the island of Utøya. Survivors and their relatives were among those who attended a remembrance ceremony.
Video game developers are used to spending a lot of time online, but their annual conference in San Francisco is usually an opportunity to meet face-to-face.
Not this year, though. Like so many events, the Game Developers Conference has gone virtual. And as Mark New reports, the health and safety of gamers is a particular focus.
In past years, 29,000 people have packed halls in San Francisco to attend the Game Developers Conference. This year, it's gone completely virtual, with 550 online sessions, teaching everything from how to create gaming worlds to how to build metahumans. The head of Intel's Worldwide Gaming Solutions, Kim Pallister, says mobile has exploded to make up over half the gaming market.
People are spending more time and more money playing games. This is a trend we only saw accelerated during the pandemic. What we've seen is that people are gaming across multiple devices, and the games are evolving to reach them on those different devices.
Game Developers Conference also discussed some issues that many people might find rather surprising, like the rise in gaming injuries. One participating group, called 1HP, is made up of medical professionals dedicated to improving gamer health. They reviewed surveys and studies that found the #1 issue plaguing gamers is not carpal tunnel syndrome.
Back at 25 or at 31%, neck at 11%, shoulder at 11%, headaches at 8%, forearm at 7%, wrist at 6%, hand and fingers at 5%. That's huge.
Your muscles have an optimal length-tension relationship where they can react the fastest, they can be the strongest, and ergonomics is part of that.
At other sessions, GDC took on racism.
I can't count the number of times in gaming I've been called the N-word.
And sexism.
It's probably been years since I've used voice chat.
These gamers say they're hesitant to use voice chat because they don't want to deal with the harassment of being identified as a woman.
The trends show that women are more and more getting involved in esports, and they're, despite the harassment and the other negativity that they face, women like games.
Whether technology can solve the harassment issue was a talking point for this discussion on virtual identities.
My name is Mike Pappas. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Modulate, which makes the world's first real-time voice skins. What that means is that this isn't actually my real voice.
Of course, this isn't my real voice either.
But Pappas was asked whether his technology just makes it easier for people to mask their true identity in order to harass people.
A recent study came out showing 60% of women online look for an opportunity to mask their gender. That's horrible. I wish we didn't live in that world. And, we're doing other work at Modulate to try and get away from that world and actually get rid of those bad actors. But at the same time, given that we do live in that world today, I think there is a lot of power to giving that kind of, opportunity for these folks to feel safer online.
One takeaway from the group is that no single technology can completely change a toxic culture. Virtual GDC, though, does plan for its own big change next year, as it plans to return to being an in-person convention. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
The headlines again. Tens of thousands of people moved from their homes in flood-hit China. The death toll rises to 33 as record rainfall continues to batter the country.
Germany begins the clear-up operation in the aftermath of its devastating flooding, and there's a warning of more severe weather to come. Well, that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com. See you again tomorrow. Same time, same place from all of the team in London. Goodbye.
Goodbye.